A Chinese Coast Guard vessel sustained serious damage after accidentally colliding with its own Chinese warship, which also sustained visible damage. As the two Chinese vessels were harassing a smaller Philippine Coast Guard ship through dangerous maneuvers during a dramatic confrontation in the vicinity of Scarborough Shoal in the West Philippine Sea. The Philippine Coast Guard said the collision happened at 8 a.m. after the Chinese Navy and Coast Guard vessels conducted maneuvers against the BRP Suluan and used a water cannon, which the Philippine Coast Guard ship vessel successfully evaded. The Chinese Coast Guard ship 3104, which was chasing the BRP Suluan at high speed, performed a risky maneuver from the PCG vessel's starboard quarter, leading to the impact with the PLA Navy warship. This resulted in substantial damage to the CCG vessel's forecastle, while the Chinese warship also sustained visible damages. After the collision of China Coast Guard 3104 and People's Liberation Army Navy 164, two floating objects can be seen near the damaged ship. No confirmation of a man overboard incident from the CCG, but they were seen lowering a rigid hull inflatable boat right after the incident. The Philippine Coast Guard presumed a man fell overboard while others sustained injuries due to the collision based on the video taken by the PCG personnel on board the BRP Suluan. Terriella said the PCG, through radio, offered to help in the rescue and provide medical assistance to the CCG personnel who might have been injured, though the Chinese Coast Guard did not respond. They never responded to PCG radio call, said Terriella, adding that it was the Chinese Navy ship that came near the damaged CCG vessel after the collision to extend help.
PG-3104, this is BRP Suluan 4406. This is the Philippine Coast Guard vessel. Should you need any assistance, we have medical personnel on board. Should you need any assistance, we have medical personnel on board. I repeat, should you need any assistance, we are willing to provide assistance. Over.
According to Ray Powell, the Chinese vessels conducted a search and rescue operation at the Scarborough Shoal. At least one Chinese Coast Guard and 8 militia ships have been conducting search and rescue operation 15 to 25 nautical miles east of the shoal since yesterday afternoon's mishap with a PLA destroyer. The damaged vessel, CCG 3104, has been AIS dark since before the incident. The People's Liberation Army Navy destroyer continued to pursue BRP Suluan for an hour after the incident yesterday, August 11, 2025, leaving the damaged China Coast Guard vessel behind. The disabled ship was later approached by another Chinese naval vessel. A Philippine Coast Guard Islander aircraft was also spotted in the area following the incident. The Chinese began tailing the PCG and the BFAR vessels at 6 a.m. 2 hours later, some 10.5 nautical miles from the shoal where the collision occurred. The other Philippine Coast Guard ship involved in the mission, the BRP Teresa Magbanua, escorted the dozens of Filipino fishermen waiting nearby to a secure location so the supplies could be distributed. Terriella said there is a possibility the Chinese would distort facts to blame the PCG for the incident. The Chinese Coast Guard, in its own statement, accused the Philippine ships of intruding under the pretext of delivering supplies to fishing boats. The Philippines sent multiple Coast Guard and government vessels, under the pretext of delivering supplies to fishing boats, to forcibly intrude into waters near China's Huangyan Dam, despite repeated dissuasion and warnings from the Chinese side. The Philippines' moves seriously infringed upon China's sovereignty and rights and interests, and seriously harmed peace and stability at sea. China has taken necessary measures in accordance with the law to protect its territorial sovereignty and maritime rights, which are reasonable and legal. The China Coast Guard, in accordance with the law, took all necessary measures, including tracking, monitoring, blocking, and controlling, to drive the Philippine vessels away. The facts once again prove that the Philippines' deliberate infringement and provocation at sea are the root causes of the escalating tensions. China urges the Philippines to immediately cease its infringing provocations and not to challenge China's firm determination to safeguard its legitimate rights and interests. On-site operations were conducted in a professional, standard, and lawful manner, China Coast Guard spokesperson Gan Yu said in a statement, without mentioning the collision. What international observers are saying. Brent Sadler, a retired U.S. Navy captain and senior research fellow with the Heritage Foundation, on X. What comes next will be important as to how tensions play out. There was already an unusual flotilla of Chinese ships headed to Philippine Islands to the north of Luzon, south of Taiwan. Beijing-based think tank of South China Sea Strategic Situation Probing Initiative, in an earlier report said that the South China Sea dispute is not simply a test of maritime law, but of whether international law can evolve beyond its colonial and Eurocentric foundations to accommodate a genuinely pluralistic global order. It's unusual for a Chinese warship to interact directly with Philippine forces, and Guilin's actions are being viewed by analysts as an escalation. It remains to be seen whether the incident marks the beginning of heavier PLA Navy involvement in the dispute or whether China will escalate further. The Philippines is expected to continue challenging Chinese maritime incursions into its exclusive economic zone, with President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. reiterating last week his pledge not to yield 1 square inch of Philippine-claimed waters. Meanwhile, the Philippine Coast Guard arrived safely in Manila after the successful resupply mission. PCG recognizes BRP Suluan crew for bravery amid recent Bajo de Masinloc incident. The proud men and women of BRP Suluan, their seamanship and presence of mind, secured PCG vessel while outwitting 2 larger Chinese ships in the West Philippine Sea. The Philippine Coast Guard Commandant, Admiral Ronnie Gil L. Gavin, spearheaded the awarding ceremony for BRP Suluan, MRRV 4406, at Pier 15, Port Area Manila today, August 12, 2025. This deployment is in line with the directives of President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. to safeguard the nation's maritime domain and ensure the protection of Filipino fishermen in the West Philippine Sea. The BRP Suluan was dispatched on August 10, 2025 to conduct maritime patrol in the vicinity waters off Bajo de Masinloc. During the ceremony, Admiral Gavin commended the bravery, selfless dedication, and sacrifices of PCG personnel in upholding safety and security within the Philippine territory. Furthermore, Admiral Gavin also recognized the efforts of the West Philippine Sea Group in handling the information operation and coordination during the maritime patrol. The Philippine Coast Guard have proven that indeed they are the most durable point man in keeping the peace at sea, Admiral Gavin said. On board the vessel were 43 individuals, including members of the Coast Guard Medical Service, Maritime Surveillance Team, Coast Guard Special Operations Force, Angels of the Sea from the Coast Guard Weapons, Communications, Electronics and Information System Command, media representatives from GMA Network, and personnel from the Coast Guard Public Affairs Service.